Dr.
Yep,
Dalton
we're all
joining
set.
you.
We're all set. Yes,
Well, here.
yes. Yep, we're all set.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I'd like to call to order the MBTA subcommittee meeting for April 25th, 2024. Thank you all for coming today. We have our consultant back. So Amy, I don't know if we want to start there, if there's any other business we want to handle first. You just want to dive right
I
in.
think let's dive right in.
Okay, so Sarah, take it away.
All right, well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be back before you all digitally. So since the last time I spoke with the subcommittee, I received some sites and parcels from you folks that you wanted to see modeled, and I carried out that modeling and wrote up a technical memo, which I forwarded to Amy. Hopefully you've all had the chance to at least take a look at it, but I have a few basic slides to walk through, just a very quick summary of what the modeling was, what the results were, and then you'll have a chance to ask me clarifying questions and give me feedback in real time. So that's what I hope to accomplish this evening.
Great.
Let's pull it up. Here we go. All right. So I will briefly recap this. So our goal in crafting this district is to create a compliant district that is at least 50 acres in total size, has a modeled unit capacity of at least 750 units, and has a minimum gross density across the district of at least 15 units per acre. So this group, after a little bit of back and forth discussions between myself and Amy and her forwarding me your comments, come on, there. So the two spots we looked at were these. These are both areas with existing multifamily development, but both with potential expansion for that use. Some adjacent parcels that are either undeveloped or could be redeveloped. So that was the basic framework. So I'm just going to quickly touch on both of these sites. All right, so first off, we have in the northern part of town off North Main Street, this site with the existing development, the Charles. So you see here, there's two parcels here. This one to the north is where the existing development is. Excuse me. And this one to the south sort of snakes around, and most of this back area is wetland. But it does add, combine with this to create a larger upland site. So this in total is almost 50 acres. I believe the conversation was that this group definitely was interested in the site, but needed to add some more to make up the acreage. So this is most of the area you need. It's complicated, of course, by the fact that much of it is undevelopable. This map is showing the delineated wetlands on the parcel. So that's not to say it's useless, but it's gonna look a little different than a parcel that's all upland. So for example, the gross density calculation might look a little weird because of the way that the model handles density. It actually subtracts the wetland area from the densities. So even though most of this site is not a developable wetland, the density doesn't take a huge hit. But in order to get the number of units we need to make up that number of units here. So you can see that in this modeling scenario. So at the top here, this is how large it is, the number of estimated units that the model spits out, and the calculation of what the gross density is. And that's the calculation they're using to check whether it's over 15. And then
Sarah,
the bottom
just to clarify, sorry. So because I think our number was really 15 units per acre, if someone were to look at this, it's 18.9 because part of the parcel is not developable, so it has to be slightly denser on the part that is developable.
Yeah, I can go into more detail on how they do that calculation, but essentially all that green area, they take it out of the denominator. So even though the parcel itself is 49 acres, let's say off the top of my head, maybe 20 acres of that is wetland. So they're really, even though the parcel is really almost 50 acres, the way they calculate that gross density number is they take the total number of units and divide it by, say, like 29 acres of upland instead. So in a parcel like this with a lot of wetlands, that effect will be very pronounced. Usually the numbers are pretty close, but it just so happens this parcel has a lot of wetlands. So that's why that is a different number.
Thank you.
Yep, so some of the dimensional regulations I pulled from the underlying zoning. It's good to keep those the same where possible. So these are both large lots. The minimum lot size really doesn't come into it. It could be a lot larger and not affect anything. Maximum building height and stories kept it at 3. The maximum building coverage on the lot in your zoning, there's not an explicit number for that I could find, but I just picked something that was seemed reasonable and worked with the numbers and didn't cap the units. Parking spaces per unit, 1.25. I believe that's what you currently require for multifamily in your bylaw. And then the maximum units per acre, 20. And that is because since so much of this, again, because so much of this parcel is undevelopable, we have to allow for higher density in the developable parts in order to hit the numbers. Like if this was 50 acres of developable land, you could do roughly 15 units per acre across it, and that would get you your 750. But since so much of this is undevelopable in the upland portions of this site, as well as this site, we had to up the density to hit those numbers, which is why these numbers can still work despite a big chunk of the site being undevelopable. That just means you have to have higher density in the developable parts to make that work.
Dennis, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna comment that right now there are 300 units there and the modeling is 409. So worst case, we'd be looking at about an extra 109 units at that particular site. If somebody were to want to put an extra story on those buildings or something else. So the exposure is minimal, really.
Just to add that, so the potential of this lot is 109 units
Additional.
addition.
There's 300 there now.
Yeah, that is correct. The unit capacity is the maximum number of units that could be on the site. The actual net increase is exactly what you said.
And I mean, there's always the risk that the owner tears the building down and builds a higher density,
Sure.
but that's,
That's down the road.
it may never happen, or it could happen. We don't know.
Sure.
It's hard to say.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
My understanding is we need at least 50 acres. We're at 49. How are we gonna make up?
Well,
We have it covered.
That's why we have the second
That's
site.
why we
Literally
have
what-
Curtis, right, we've got
Okay.
it covered, we've got it.
And the minimum, the minimum, we need one lot with 25 acres, correct?
Minimum. So
Minimum, okay.
this North
Contiguous.
Main Street site counts for that.
Okay, fine,
Yep.
all right.
All right.
And I was
There's
not a
another-
math major.
Right. There's no other questions. I'll move on to the overview of the second site.
Thank you.
So yes, as we just mentioned, that site alone is not quite large enough. So we added this other area where the Curtis Apartments development is. Again, similar thinking. This is an area with existing multifamily with the potential to possibly expand. And I know that I understand that some of those adjacent parcels are already being eyed for development interest. So it makes sense. So this is a smaller area, under 20 acres. Unlike the other site, there's only a minimal amount of wetlands here to the west. So the minimum lot size here is designed so that all of these little lots can count. If they were ever developed, they'd probably be, consolidated with the larger lot, but the way the model works is it looks at the parcels individually. So we need to make the minimum lot size small enough so that it will look at those little parcels and consider them developable. So that's about what it has to be, 35,000 to get all those little parcels conforming. the max building height, I set it at 4 because it seemed like the existing apartments had 4 floors. That's all there is to it, just trying to match what's there. And the max building coverage and the parking spaces per unit are the same as in the first scenario. And the maximum units per acre is, again, 20 here for the same reason as before, just because we need more density here to make up for all that undevelopable land. So the model unit capacity is split somewhat evenly. So the first one was about 400, and this is about 370. So that all adds up to a total area of 67.4. So that's larger than you need, but again, the actual developable portion of the land is a lot smaller than that. Excuse me again. The model unit capacity is a little bit over 750, but not that much, like a couple dozen over. And honestly, it's probably good to have a little bit of wiggle room because, if, God forbid you submit this and there's some like small error found in the model or something that knocks like 5 units off, you don't want to have that like wreck your compliance. So being a little over 750 is perfectly fine. And, the character of 750 versus 778 is not so different. And then again, the gross density actually ended up being fairly high, again, because of this weird thing they do where they take all these wetland areas. So even though it looks like, well, that's sort of like 19, 20-ish gross density is looking at just the buildable portions. If you look at the whole site, the whole 67 acres, 778 units on 67 acres, we could do the math, but it's a lot lower than that. But just the way they calculate the density, they take out a big chunk of it, so it looks, so that's what the density looks like. But that's what HLC would be looking for compliance. They don't care about any other way of calculating density. That's the formula they've chosen, so that's the formula they'll check, and it's above 15. So that's the basic outputs of this scenario. So the things to discuss are, first of all, allowing you all to ask me any further questions, just so we're all on the same page and you understand everything you need to understand to make decisions. And then take a look at the dimensional regulations I used. Are those good? Do we want to tweak those? Any things you'd want to change with those, or are they fine? And then just double check that, knowing what we now know about how this works in the model, are there any changes to the boundaries of this district that we might want to see? So I will throw it back to you folks.
So Sarah, are there any, so I feel like this submission is a bit on like razor's edge, right? Like we're really kind of very close to complying, but not complying. Are other towns submitting similar types of plans? And do you know if any of those have sort of passed the muster? Because I know in your response, you wrote that, the Attorney General might have issues that we've picked a lot that has a lot of wetlands. They might, would they kick it back because of that?
Based on my understanding of how they review these, no. This, HLC is always free to change its mind, I suppose, but as the guidelines are written, this complies. In terms of how much wiggle room, some communities are cutting it close. I would say, the model is an estimate anyway. So they've said here, these exact numbers in this spreadsheet, do this math, and this is what we will use. So even if it's a little arbitrary, it's the arbitrary path they've chosen. So I don't see any reason other than there being some sort of like error to question that 778 number. So other towns have been cutting it even closer. And I don't necessarily think that will be an issue. I mean, it's always, you're certainly free if you would feel more comfortable proposing a district with more wiggle room. That's a perfectly valid choice to make. But based on my understanding of the guidelines, this should be compliant.
Okay. Bill, any questions?
No,
Okay, Jeff?
Have we essentially solved this problem with 2 parcels?
Pretty much. You,
Okay.
yeah, you missed a pivotal meeting when Sarah was here first, and we found out that we could put the overlay on top of these parcels that already have dense housing.
Right.
And so essentially, because we assume they're not gonna tear the Curtis down to
Sure.
build more housing because it's relatively new,
Right.
that they would, you know, the net change in housing would be minimal,
Right.
because, you know, we're gonna, and other town, like Chelmsford, I think, has done something pretty similar.
Yeah.
There's an apartment building going up in their municipality that they just put the overlay district on top of that, just to, so not to add more housing on open land. So, I mean, essentially, yes, we
Great.
may have solved, well, we solved the part of the submission, we had to get it passed.
Is our next step then to run it by Boston to see if it, as a straw man, to see if it holds water?
Do you like the pre-read? Is that what you're thinking, do the pre-read?
Yeah, I don't know how backed up they are in terms of reviewing, but I mean,
What's your recommendation,
think-
Sarah, on that?
So they are busy. We could ask them how long they think it might take. Second of all, they would probably want to review a full draft submission, like zoning language. Rather than just look at this model. I don't know if they would make time for that. So I think it could be a good idea to float it by HLC, but I don't think we're at that stage yet. So I think probably so the next step from here, if you folks are totally happy with this approach, don't want to tweak anything, or just want to, or have enough tweaks that you can just tell it to me at this meeting. The next thing to do is start to develop the actual zoning language, incorporating these sites, incorporating this, these draft dimensional regulations, and coming up with an actual bylaw. And that is what you could submit to HLC for evaluation of compliance. So the answer is yes, but not yet.
Okay, we're on the path, it sounds like, though.
yeah.
Mhm.
Great.
Sahan,
I'm okay at the moment.
okay.
I have one question. The way this is presented, is that critical? Like, do we present them a three-ring binder? A PowerPoint, something that I don't want to say slick, but upscale as opposed to just a bylaw
To the public or to,
to the state?
oh,
There's a specific compliance application they want you to use. So
Okay.
everyone will be submitting the same thing.
Okay, that answers that question. Okay,
And it's a digital submission.
okay. That's just a question again.
Rob, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I think just one question. So Sarah, those dimensional regulations that you used, I assume those are what drives that gross density calculation? And
Yep, that
so,
controls how many units there are. So yeah.
gotcha.
Can be
So I
tweaked,
mean, if we tweak any of those, that could substantially affect the model and our compliance with this.
That's true. So any tweaks you want to make to that, I would have to check in the model and figure out a way to make sure it still complies. They're absolutely tweakable. If there's any you don't like, we can talk it through. But yeah, we can't be tweaking willy-nilly. We have to check that we're still in
Yep.
compliance. But that's not super hard to do. Of
Okay, yeah, nope, that makes sense. I have nothing further. Thank you for looking at this. We appreciate it.
course, my pleasure.
Great job.
Okay, open it up to public commentary, anyone in the audience or online? Nick,
If the Charles remained as is and the Curtis remained as is there any numbers to what could possibly end up in the adjacent parcels, the three next to the Curtis and the one just south of the Charles?
I mean, I guess
For
it would be
housing, for
it
unit
would be the
numbers?
20 units per acre, so I think you would take the difference.
It would be 369 units as opposed to the 260 that are there now at the Curtis. And they actually have identified those three parcels in front that they cleared that they wanted to put another building on. So it would physically take up any balance of what they could do at that site.
So if the state's intent is to add more housing, is that kind of a good sales pitch to say, hey, although we're using existing, this is what could end up here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we run the risk of, like I said, again, if someone were to bulldoze what's there now and build more dense housing, we run that risk. I mean, I think we just have to prove to the state that we're willing, like, this is in compliance and it allows for more dense housing.
And I think what we need to remember is it's for the designation. It's
Right.
not for the production,
Right.
which, who knows, that may be coming down the line, but
Yeah.
our task is simply designation at this point.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, provide the opportunity.
That's it.
Okay, anyone else? In the audience? Okay, so for the board, are we in agreement that we feel like this is the best plan forward for now, and to have Sarah to start working on the zoning language and, what we might want to get pre-read and all of that?
I'm in agreement.
Yeah, 100%.
Do we have to vote? We don't have to vote.
No, I don't think we should vote, but Sarah, it was your understanding that we're not quite ready for the pre-read just because we need the language of a potential
Yeah.
bylaw, so we're
Yeah,
not ready
it
for
was-
that yet.
Okay. And Sarah, how long, what is the turnaround for you on, coming up with that new language?
Let's see. I'd have to talk with our principal planner, Judy Barrett, for sure. She likes to be involved with all the bylaw language you write, just because it's, serious legal stuff. She likes to have her eyes on every piece of bylaw that leaves our office. But gosh, okay, what is it? End of April? I mean, certainly sometime in May. I think that's
Okay.
safe to say. Not an enormously long time. We're talking like weeks, not months. But I can get back to Amy. I'll talk with her and figure out if we can like set a more specific deadline, just so you folks know what to expect.
Okay.
Do you think, Sarah, realistically, if it was, I think what if we shot possibly like a May 23rd next meeting? Which I think that would be, it would be, May 23rd. Would that be a possibility?
That is possible.
Okay,
That is possible.
okay,
It's a pretty good timing.
Yeah, it's right before the
Yeah.
holiday.
right, and it's before the holiday, right,
Yeah, okay.
that was the
Is it-
thought there,
I'll be out of town, but
okay,
I'm coming back.
okay.
I think that's doable. Plus, it's the same night as. our
Right.
planning board.
And then, do we need to talk about inclusionary zoning as a group? So we can require up to 10% affordable.
Mhm.
Sarah, how difficult is it to write the zoning with or without? I don't want to cause more work. Or
I
I
mean,
guess maybe, oh,
it's-
sorry, go ahead.
It's one additional section. It's not particularly complicated language.
Okay.
We just want to know whether or not you want it in there, basically.
What are most other towns doing?
I think that most are putting it in. I think we'd certainly encourage you to put it in if for no
Yeah,
other reason
okay.
than to stay afloat with your chapter 40B requirements if stuff does get built. So
Okay,
Is it, I'm sorry, is it necessary to put that language because we already met our,
well, you run the risk if it's just market rate, we could end up below the percentage,
Okay.
the 10%. And then we'd have, then we'd be dealing with more 40B.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a
This is-
harm in putting it in there.
it's included.
There's no
It's not
harm,
40B.
right?
okay,
No, but if we only allow for market rate apartments, we run the risk
Correct.
of falling under the 10%
okay.
threshold. I think we're all in agreement that we should include that,
Mhm.
that language,
Mhm.
okay?
Okay.
And then my only other question, well, maybe not my only one, but I know, Sarah, you, in your memo, you mentioned backup scenarios.
Mhm.
Can we run concurrently with that? Because I don't think at the moment we're ready to talk backup scenarios, but maybe we want to come up with some while you're writing, while you and Judy are working on our zoning language. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that honestly, that's sort of what I was thinking. You know, you all seem pretty happy with this scenario. I think it works pretty well in the model. It's just that, you know, when the time comes to bring this to the public, you know, there's always something. I mean, it could go through perfectly smoothly, but has really, really helped in the past for towns to be able to say, okay, we hear you and we have backup plans to change our scenario based on your feedback. So just, even if it's as simple as just like having a running list of alternate sites, even if we don't have to model them all, and we only do that in, you know, in case of emergency, in case we need to, just having that ready to fall back on, I think would be very helpful for the town.
Okay.
Makes
Okay,
it, makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So Sarah, anything else for us? Anything else you wanted to point out in your memo that you think we should be paying attention to?
No, like most of the remaining little questions are things that we can just do in our draft, and if you have a problem with them, you'll catch them when you review that draft. The only other major thing I would discuss is like site plan review or design standards. So you do have the opportunity to subject this development to a site plan review process, as long as that cannot be used to arbitrarily deny the project. You still have the ability to have local review over, you know, some aspects of site design. And I know that you have some form of site plan review in your bylaw already. So I guess the question is, we can look at those provisions and see if we see any potential problems, but if there aren't any, you could just say, you know, this is subject to site plan review as stated in section da da da. I guess the question is, are there any other, are those a good set of standards to apply to this? You have a chance now to decide what design standards will apply to this going forward. Just, I would encourage you to put some thought into whether you're fine with what you got now, if there's other aspects of it you might be interested in regulating that, you know, we could look into and see if you can. Just, that's another major thing to think about.
Rob, I'd kind of like to hear your opinion about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, I think we definitely want to make sure that this does require site plan review. I need to take a look at the requirements for site plan review in town. I believe it's based off of square footage of disturbance essentially. I envision that if any of these projects were to be developed in the future, it would most likely trip our threshold for site plan review, even if we didn't include it specifically in the language. But I think we're gonna want to solidify that just to make darn sure that you know, the town is covered, that we are going to have some type of approval criteria if somebody develops these. So I can take a look at that and see if there's maybe a way to, if we do need to add some additional language to the zoning article to specifically trip site plan review for something. I'll take a look at that, and maybe at the next meeting, I can send maybe some information to the board, or the subcommittee, I should say, and Sarah, and that way we can review it at the next meeting, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yes.
I have one question. Sarah, what else you need from us to facilitate this process for you?
Honestly, I think that we've settled on a scenario that you seem happy with. I think for now, let us concoct this zoning, then we'll sort of be counting on you to, you know, read through that carefully, vet it, you know, and start engaging in that editing process with us. But I think we have enough to at least take a crack at the initial draft.
Okay, great.
Perfect. So with that, I mean, I think maybe the next discussion with Sarah or maybe Judy is about the outreach and education portion. So I think on our end, Amy, we need to apply for the second grant from MHP, if we're ready for that. And then, maybe at our next meeting, or maybe Amy offline can talk with Sarah about, you know, a plan for that. But I do think as a subcommittee, we feel that kind of getting something in the books like early to mid-June-ish before school ends and people are kind of gone for the summer is a good idea, because we want to make sure, and you know, obviously there's a lot going on. We've got town election and special town meeting coming up and all that, so we don't want to get lost in the shuffle, but we want to make sure voters and the residents are, you know, informed before they turn off for the summer, I guess.
Makes sense to me.
Brings one question.
Yes.
The meeting of the 23rd. Are we gonna have enough time to discuss this and the educational aspect? Or do we want to possibly have a meeting the 9th to the 16th to hypothetically flush out what we want to do for education? So we
I
have
don't think
something
we'll be
written.
ready by then.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think we'll be ready. And I feel like the discussion will just be like, hey, we need to pick a date. Sarah, I'm assuming you have off the shelf materials and other, you know, resources available, for public outreach, so, I mean, what's the lift on, like, if we were to host a meeting at our public library, like, what does your team need, or what timing do you need to figure out materials and other things?
Let's see. You would definitely want to make some maps, some handouts, tweak the slides. Obviously, we have some, we've given, the MBTA Communities Basics presentation many times. We have slides for it, but obviously we need to, incorporate community specific details. Factoring in print time. I mean, I'd probably want to know at least let's be safe and say 3 weeks in advance.
Okay. Okay, that is good to know. So I think that's enough. I think that's enough time for us to. Like if we discuss it on the 23rd, I think that's enough time, because then it'll be three-ish weeks until kind of mid-June.
okay. Like target something the week of the 10th to the 17th.
Well, I guess we have to decide, does a weeknight evening make more sense, or is it sort of like a Saturday kind of situation? I personally don't have a preference. I can make anything, but what will get the most people to come?
I think we have 2 options to look at. I think one would be a weeknight presentation at the library. And then maybe, I don't know how we facilitate this, a day meeting at the senior center.
Okay,
I think their attendance is probably peaked during the day
yeah,
as opposed to at night.
Yep.
Is that correct?
I didn't hear what you said.
Your attendance is peaked during the day
At the senior center,
as opposed to a night meeting.
yeah. So
I would say yes.
Okay,
okay, during the day. So maybe we're thinking the second week of June or the third week of June?
Second week, I think will be better.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I'm not here on the 5th. I'm at a conference. So,
Okay, what day is the election?
It's the first Tuesday in
June
June.
So that'll be done.
okay,
Yeah, election will be done.
So that's a good week. Maybe we could do, 2 that week, one at the senior center and one at the library.
yeah. And if
And-
there's anything like the business association or other organizations we want to get in front of, maybe we can block and tackle as a
Yep.
group.
I can drop them a note if you want me to.
Sure.
Again.
Okay, so Sarah, we're gonna shoot for the second week of June. For one, most likely 2 outreach meetings. So maybe next meeting, we can kind of solidify the dates, the times. We can coordinate with the senior center, someone, or maybe Amy could coordinate.
And I really would like to pull together the select board. I'd like to get the zoning board. I really think it's
Yeah.
important that we include the people that live here that are on the boards that do exactly what you're doing, to hear this. And so I'm not sure how we can bring in that component of it, but I'd like to, open the invite to Board of Health, again, select board, zoning boards, just some of the important committees and
Can
boards
we-
throughout town. So I'm
Can
not sure.
we send a memo to each of the boards just saying, hey, on, June 12th, we're gonna be doing this.
Mhm.
It would be great if there was representatives from each
I
board.
think even the fire department, I know, speaking of
Yeah.
that, they,
Both.
right,
police and
fire, police, and I just think it's really important we reach
Yeah.
out to the employees that work here that live in the town. That.
I mean, do we want to decide on a date now? So
We
we
can,
can
sure.
kind of get that going?
I think once we get that educational component too. Sarah, do you guys assist with that? Like, you must have things that are already developed, correct? Or what does the grant cover as far as like the educational component? And how to do that?
Let's see. I believe we are scoped to help out with a couple meetings.
Mhm.
And at the very, very least, we'll certainly leave you with the educational slides and handouts and things, but I believe we're able to participate in a couple of meetings.
Okay. Perfect.
So, okay, so the second week of June, I mean, there's Wednesday, the 12th. Does that conflict with any other town meetings, board meetings?
I'd have to check with Hillary on that with her calendar and then
Okay.
Larry too. Just
Doesn't
to see.
conservation meet on?
That's what I'll have to check.
I think the
Let's
Concom is
see.
meeting on the
I think
12th.
so.
Okay,
I think so.
Select board is meeting on the 17th,
Mhm.
so. maybe we
so
can combine the-
does planning or zoning meet on the 13th?
We do.
You guys do? So it may have to be the 11th, which is a Tuesday.
I mean, could we do it, and maybe we can't, but could we do it? I don't know if we could do a joint meeting, or do we do it at the select board meeting? And invite other ones, like invite the planning board to go to that? I mean, there's probably different ways we could do that, so everybody doesn't have to be out necessarily 2 nights. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
or,
The only
There's
thing is
two
if we want the
possibilities.
public to come, won't we, like, there's only so much room here, right? I guess that's the only thing.
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Yes.
When does school get out, Dennis, do you know?
Not sure. It's probably around the 20th, Bill, in that range, but I hear behind me, they're talking about the senior center with coffee and snacks, so that would be a big.
That would be great. That would be great.
Senior center, that would
Yeah,
be-
that would be the great.
that
idea.
easily accommodates
I
100
think
anyway.
that's a great
Yeah.
idea.
The guy from the development on Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
We had a tremendous crowd that night.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
do
Great
it, so do it at the
suggestion.
senior center in
Yeah.
the evening and then
Yes.
during the day as well, like a daytime.
I think daytime could be difficult.
It would only be
But, right,
seniors.
with-
Can
with-
I,
Right, Rob, what do you
Yes.
suggest?
yeah, mind if I chime in for just 1 second? I think I might have a solution. I would say if it makes sense, maybe to set up 2 meetings for the public, maybe one during the day, one during the evening, scattered on separate days of the week, potentially, or a weekend, if it makes sense for the board. As far as outreach during the meetings, I think just requesting for select board, conservation, planning, zoning, and actually maybe not zoning. I don't know if you can have discussion items for a ZBA meeting, but Board of Health as well, to just request a discussion item on those agendas in the upcoming months. And I know, like myself, I'm probably going to be at most of those meetings starting pretty soon. So I don't even mind just giving a quick spiel on when, there'll be an informational meeting once we've figured out a time, and maybe not necessarily get into the all the information associated with the MBTA zoning, but just kind of tell people at these meetings that might be in attendance or listening that, hey, FYI, mark on your calendars, this, please, keep this date in mind for, informative meeting on this zoning, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, potentially, I know meetings during the week might, or during a weekday would definitely be, I think, tricky for a lot of people. If it's helpful, it might make sense to set up like a really good informative meeting with this board and our consultant Sarah on either a weeknight or even potentially a weekend. But if we had 2 meetings, maybe it would be good to have a weekday meeting at, the senior center. Perhaps that could be whoever can make it from the subcommittee, town staff, and then potentially Sarah, if you can make that. I don't know if that makes sense to the committee, but that would just be my suggestion.
That's great.
Not a bad idea.
Bill.
Occasionally I have a good idea, but very
I thought it
occasionally.
is twofold. Rob, you were talking about the various departments. How long do we envision this presentation lasting?
I don't know, I mean, it's either gonna be, is it gonna be a formal presentation or is it gonna be like a rolling, come in and then we will explain things as you come in?
I think it would start as a formal presentation with probably just the 2 slides that Sarah showed us.
Yeah, yeah,
About like, we think we can solve this problem with these modifications to these 2 sites and with these changes to our bylaws.
and then we just kind of leave it open for people to come and go, if they can't make it for the first part, they can come and ask questions.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Because that doesn't feel to me like it would be an hour-long presentation. I think it
No,
would be
no.
all
No,
10 minutes.
We don't need to get into all the minutia.
Here's my other thought. Rob, what would you think of at an all department meeting in town on a Tuesday? Just do an overview. And then still
Well-
bring those people in, but that may be a good venue for it.
Well, I mean, the department head meeting is more for internal staff. So, and I think, there will have to be conversations with internal staff to keep everybody in the loop. And I think most people are kind of aware of the direction that this subcommittee has been going in. Are you talking about using that as a public outreach venue?
No,
Bill?
just internal.
Oh, yeah, internally, I think that's great, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to affect, this subcommittee, because we can, if once we have materials, I think, it can be as simple as just scheduling something internally with town staff to get them up to date. I think that that's fine. I think that this conversation is more for the public outreach side of things,
Correct.
right? Yeah, which.
Yeah, because we need voters to show up, whether they agree or disagree, they want to vote yes or vote no.
I think we have to come back in September. And
we'll have to do another one in September, yes, definitely. But I think the course of action is second week of June. Maybe Amy, you can come up with some dates and times, whether it's.
I'll call the senior
Yeah,
center.
one during the day, one in the evening, and we'll kind of figure out the venue and that kind of stuff, but I think we just kind of keep that penciled in for everyone. And we'll nail down kind of the final, once we figure out what dates are available,
Sure.
and then, we'll go from there.
That sounds great.
But yeah, I think the 2 meetings are good.
Yep.
We'll definitely probably have to have 2 meetings in the fall, I would think as well,
Mhm.
just before November, so.
So I can call her tomorrow, Josie, and figure out for the senior center and get some dates. And Sarah, I'll run them by you too as well, because I know you have just some plans for different meetings too at night, so we'll come up with a date.
Yep, keep me in the loop about dates. I'll say right now I don't have a ton on my calendar for June yet, so getting in early enough where I can probably be flexible.
Perfect.
Great.
That's great. Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So with that, do we just have to approve the meeting minutes?
So our next meeting date,
Great.
I'm thinking
I'll dip off.
the 23rd.
Bye, Sarah. Thank you.
Goodbye, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So we're
Sarah.
good 23rd, and we're gonna say at 5:30.
Yep.
Okay.
And we will review, the Sarah's drafted zoning
Yes.
bylaws
Mhm,
in that meeting
mhm.
and finalize our plan for public outreach for June.
Yes,
Okay,
good.
all right, we're chugging along.
You need a motion for the minutes?
Yes, I need a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 28th.
I would offer a motion to approve the March 28th, 2024 meeting of the MBTA Section 3A Subcommittee as written.
I'll second the motion.
So everyone say aye?
Aye.
Do you need to take attendance officially?
Amy, do we need official?
A roll
attendance?
call.
Sure, you can do
I have
it.
Jeff Swanbacha and I say aye.
Bill O'Connell says aye.
Liz Bartlett, aye.
Sounds like aye.
Do we need Rob or no?
Nope. we're all
Okay.
set.
So I would like to, well, if any other comments from the public? Anyone have anything else they want to discuss? Yes, sir.
I'm curious about something. Last time I was here a couple of weeks ago, the last meeting or whatever, this sounded really good.
Mhm.
Almost too good from what we first heard.
Yes,
Tonight, it sounds still too good.
yes.
Why are other towns turning it down? Milton turned it down, a town the other day, and the North Shore turned it down. What are we doing right that maybe they're doing wrong, or are we taking an easy way out and we're gonna get burned in the end?
So, I mean, I think we run that risk, right? Because this is such new legislation. I think there's a little subjectivity coming out of the Attorney General's office. You know, from what I understand about Milton, I think the residents didn't like the location that was chosen. As I said, I do know any sort of articles that come out about this. I know Chelmsford is kind of doing the same thing where they're overlaying where multifamily development is already going in and kind of doing a very similar tactic as us. I don't think it's the subcommittees and the officials that are saying no, it's the town's voters. It's the people that are saying no. And I think my impression is that there is a contingent of residents in the Commonwealth that believe the state is overstepping their authority on these zoning changes, and that's why residents are going to town meeting and voting no. But there are a number of towns where this has passed, it's gone to HLC, and, you know, it's worked out. You just don't hear as much about the success stories,
Thank you.
so to speak. So that's my impression. Jeff, I don't know if you have a different
I just
impression.
wanted to add to that, I think we happen to have, two existing developments which fit nicely into the model, which we can use to satisfy our obligation here. So, whereas some of these other towns may not have that existing development to leverage.
Right.
I mean, we are in different situation than they are. I mean, the areas that we chose are fairly new, and there is obviously, expansion, opportunities on it. I think, that's a huge plus for us.
Sure.
I mean, as I said, in the last 3-4 years, it's what we add, it should satisfy what the state requirements are. And with the expansion opportunities are, I think, it's right there.
And we have the opportunity as well to go put together the pre-read, which is kind of like you put together the package, you send it to Boston to give them their sort of like preliminary blessing before we take it to town meeting.
You know what else I'm wondering, and I can ask Sarah about this after, but some towns have also wanted to, when they put in the pre-read, get some guidance on the 2/3 majority or the supermajority, and make sure that we can get that clarified on what we need when we go to the town meeting, when we go to take that vote. So I think that could be something we could put to within the language when we do submit that pre-read on how we have to vote for that at the town meeting, because that's gonna be important to know.
I would also interject, I don't think we're taking by any means the easy way out. I think we're looking at this creatively, thinking outside the box. And also, we're looking what other towns have done in the past and taking an opportunity to look at what has worked and what hasn't worked. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then with having a backup plan if needed, we're thinking long-term.
Yeah.
So I think, the committee has looked out for the benefit of the town in approaching this. It's not what everyone thought it was when it was first proposed, a year ago.
Us included.
Yes, yes.
It's been a learning process,
Yeah.
an educational process.
And I will say, even if this seems to be the perfect solution, again, we could get to town meeting and the residents could still say they don't want it, so that's, you know. This could be, like I said, it's in compliance, it would have passed muster, but. The residents vote no, so that's, that's, I think, what's going on in a lot of other towns is, it's the residents for whatever reason, they're not wanting to be in compliance. Although there are some towns that have come out and said they don't want to be in compliance either, so, it's hard to say, but, our consultant has said that this plan will work and it meets the criteria, so we have to trust that, they've got the experience to get us over the finish line.
And the consultant is paid for by the state and trained by the state specifically to
Yes.
evaluate these proposals. So you're right, we've gotta have faith in them as well,
They're there to help us.
right?
Yes,
They're not a hindrance by any means.
And if this goes the way we want it, and then there is no impact to it at all,
right.
so just basically. It's a win-win for both sides.
I think part of our outreach effort has to, you just mentioned a really great point, has to include, the consequences of not doing this.
Mhm.
And there are consequences too.
Yeah, yeah. And I do think a lot of the towns that you hear of that where this has either been voted down or the town officials have said they're not gonna be in compliance. I think their reliance on grant money is, my impression is it's less than what Bellingham relies on. So, you hear the towns and, their tax bracket and their home prices are much higher than ours. So I think they're coming at it from a different perspective where maybe they're saying, hey, we're willing to give up the grant money, face litigation, so on and so forth. Whereas in our town, we do rely pretty heavily on a lot of public grants, and we have to take that into consideration. Okay. With that,
Awesome.
motion to close the meeting,
I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
I'll second it.
all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, meeting adjourned.
Great job.
Thanks, Rob.